I think the biggest thing is what can you do to simplify your life a little bit more? Maybe it's not 100%, maybe it's 1% or 10%. I can either delegate or train somebody to do something because the real fact is those projects or those jobs, there's going to be more jobs next week and next month. And that client, they may never come back, right? But my family's still there. That's the legacy. And mostly it's about how can we make our businesses better? But really the purpose of all that is to make our lives better, not be zillionaires.
Welcome to the Business Builder Way podcast, where we help business builders grow leadership skills and wisdom and stay grounded through hero stories. So let's get after it. Hey, welcome business builders. Today we're joined by Andy Richardson, and Andy is the founder of 29E6, which is a structural engineering and design firm in Beaufort, South Carolina. A lot of other cool things about Andy that fit into our business builder world too, like he's a dad, he's a very intentional husband. He's also working on creating an environment at home that is what he and his wife love. He does intentional workouts, the back porch workout program with his son. So he's run. And Andy, for all those reasons, we're really happy to have you in Business Builder Camp and in the Thursday morning builders group. And so thanks for showing up and spending some time and telling your story today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Great. How about we start in the beginning? Maybe not all the way back, or maybe sometimes people want to talk about the first business they had as a kid, but could you tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and how you built 29E6 to where you're at today?
Sure. So I really never really thought about being a business owner until about 2007 or so. And I picked up a book called 48 Days to the Work You Love by Dan Miller, who you know as well, Wayne. And so I read that book and kind of got me on my entrepreneurial journey. At the time, I was an engineer and working for an engineering company and so forth, and started thinking, what business could I start and work in? And immediately I started looking at areas outside of engineering, other things, make your millions on the internet type of thing. And I did some of that, right? I did some muses like Tim Ferriss. I read his book as well. I tried a lot of different things, even did a course, an online course for the PE exam, which is the engineering exam that engineers have to take to be licensed. And we actually have that for sale still. And so that was fun. And these different things I've done, inventions or ideas. But every time I did that, it seemed like it came back to engineering for whatever reason. I'm a spiritual person, so I felt like God was bringing me back to that. And what it boiled down to is I'm focused on being a business owner inside of engineering. And so I started my business in 2009, was doing some of these other things throughout that time, and was really using the engineering business to pay the bills while I tried all these other things. And then finally decided, hey, engineering is actually what I want to be I want to work on building this business. And as a matter of fact, that's about when I started working with you, 2017. And I rebranded the company name to its current name, 29E6. And that's just a number in engineering, kind of like a constant, like pi. 29E6, a number that's well known to engineering. Young's modulus is called, but not that necessarily matters. But that's when we rebranded the company in that year. And there was a number of reasons, but one of the reasons was to grow the company and really build it, because before that, it was more of a sole practitioner type situation where I wore all the hats. I did the books, I did the drawings, I did the calculations, and I said, okay, well, if I'm gonna keep doing engineering, I'm gonna really grow the business. And I made my first hire, like my first real hire that year, and that was scary. And, have been growing ever since. And obviously roller coaster ride of business, because at first from like 2009, it was about being a business owner in a steady way, sole practitioner, like learning more about the simple aspects of what I would call simple aspects, like how do you do books? How do you get your LLC? I mean, those things are a challenge at first, but in the long story of it, compared to hiring and these other things, not quite as complex. So the last 6-7 years have been about growing the business and how do you get sales and how do you make payroll and that type of thing. So that's a bit of a background in where I'm at currently and how I got here.
So one of those muses or businesses that you started, and this is partly what makes you who you are and makes you interesting, is the fact that you just went out and started these things and tried them, and that gave you skills that you have now that are unique. And in our community, those are some things that people at times may seek you out for, because of the willingness to do those things. So what the Ace of PE was about, that's still for sale. So if any of you have children who are trying to pass the PE exam, there you go. Go to,
Yeah, reach out to me directly if you're interested.
yeah,
We'll tell you how to get a hold of me later in the podcast.
cool. And I know you were teaching even at a college part-time how to pass the PE. So that's neat. I feel like your journey has included actually like selling that company for a while, and then they gave you the rights back to the content, everything. And so that's fascinating. And then wasn't one of your other muses some sort of online site about running or something?
Yeah, I did that around 2011. It was called startrunningforbeginners.com, and that was a muse. I built it up, tried to be number one in Google for that search term, and thought, yeah, I'm gonna make millions by doing these niche sites. And so again, what happened is I started getting busy with engineering and had to make a decision between, the PE exam, engineering, and like this running
Mm-hmm.
site. It was just a diversity of attention. My attention was
Mm-hmm.
diversified, and I needed to consolidate that. So I ended up getting rid of, I sold that site off actually for a few $100s. It was fun. I enjoy writing, I enjoy blog, but it wasn't something I could maintain. So I needed to get rid
Still
of it.
cool. You build a niche internet company and then sold it. So that's how
Yeah.
we could say that if we were gonna like summarize it. And that's fun.
To be an internet guru of how I built my niche site and sold it.
Right. Yeah, right. So you did that. And so then the engineering firm, I get it. You solopreneur, and then you start saying, no, I want to build this into quote like real business and hire people. And yes, of course, it's been really fun to be on the journey with you and watch you as you experiment and as you hire people and do these things. And so from 2017, you said you hired your first employee and it was scary. And now we just closed out 2023. So you've gotten through 6 years here. Can you tell us like current state? You're designing buildings, you're doing construction support, some big buildings, some residential stuff, and then you've got a team. And I'd like to dig in a little bit into your team, because your team and way you built that is unique. So kind of paint the picture of the business now, if you would.
Well, yeah, definitely went more traditional route and originally hiring local people, kind of training them and building that up. And one of the advantages of, I would say, my background with teaching and having a desire for that is I really do like working with people and teaching them. And so one of the groups that we were actually in together, where I met you, Wayne, was Scott Beebe, and he recommended really train, train, train. He made that a big part of his coaching. And that was something I really honed in on. And so if I was training with my employee at the time, I would hit record. Even if we're sitting right here in person, I would hit record like online and record that process. And I would definitely encourage that, because even those videos and things weren't like YouTube level, maybe, they got the job done. And the next person that came in was able to go through and watch those videos. And yeah, it was not prepared or whatever, but the next person that came in was able to then take that. And I found that she was able to do a way better job of that. And that was one of the things that's been able to help me grow the company, is instead of me training, I have other people helping train, and not only helping train, but help create these video tutorials and training library. So when somebody comes in now, they have, I think, something like 20 hours of video, not to mention the ACE to PE. We don't call it ACE to PE. I think we call it Ultimate PE or something. But they have that library of information as well. But 20 hours of how do you do stuff here at our company, because they have an engineering degree, but maybe they don't know how to design it our way, if that makes sense. And so that's one of the things, because how do you hire is always a big question. And do you go with a person who is a novice and needs training and needs growth? Or do you go with a PE or somebody who is very experienced, and then you have to kind of like retrain them on our way? Or if you don't do that, then you may have to end up kind of butting heads with that person about standards and things. And so those are growth challenges, right? And I've gone all the above, outside of that, inside of that, and all the above, because I've dealt with hiring a PE, and I think that was my first thing was, okay, hire a novice, train them and grow them how you want. And then saw some challenges with that. And so I hired numerous kind of PESEs, which stands for structural engineer, and more experienced people. And that created some challenges for a number of reasons, because you also get the situation where after you've trained somebody, they then go and leave you, right? So what do you do then? You're back to square one again. And I've dealt with some of that, especially with COVID, and that created a number of things, a number of factors with people leaving and coming and going. So about 2021, I think I had two or three full-time employees and a couple of part-time employees. And that was right about COVID too. And then I also had a few that either quit or went separate ways for whatever reason. And so I got to looking at what is working at 2096, and I had one employee that was working part-time and kind of moonlighting. And so I put an ad out, moonlight as a structural engineer, because that was working very well for us. And so I put an ad out for that, and it got a few people. And that was one thing that's helped, is to have the part-time. And that's one thing I think is unique about us, is we have numerous people that are on the part-time moonlighting side. And then we started working more on the remote side as well. So pretty much we're a remote company now. That's another aspect that's very, not necessarily unique, but even if you still look around at structural engineers, it's still predominantly on site, even though it's becoming more and more commonplace to be remote, especially with COVID and everything and Zoom. And then we're also, remote in the US, and we also have people all over the world,
Right.
really,
You're
in the US.
an international company.
Yeah, so we have US based, we have Mexico. My assistant is in Mexico. We've got a few drafters that are in India, and engineers in India, and then also Romania. And we found them different ways and connected with them different ways. But everybody that works for us is pretty much directly employed, meaning we don't have like a company per se that we hire. I found that to be helpful when you're working with somebody over, you're offshoring basically. I found it to be better to work direct, have a direct connection, as opposed to like I'm working for, hey, this company that's got like 100 drafters or engineers or something. I just feel like the direct connection is better when you're dealing with that type of situation, because you just don't know who's doing the work and what the quality. It goes back to training and understanding of what the requirements are for the job. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is a mix of different employee types. And there are certain types of work and tasks that are suited well for that, like the offshore and the outsource, even though, again, they're direct employees or just happen to be in India or Romania. But those things for certain tasks work fine. But then there's other things that I really need somebody here in the office or 2 hours away. And so we brought in a full-time PE and rehired that. But it's been really hard to hire lately, local US people. The salaries, the demand, everything has just been difficult. And we've bumped our salaries up. We keep bumping them up 10%, 20%, 30%. And so we have a really competitive salary package for a project manager, PE, but the people overseas, they're asking me for a job, and I'm not seeing that local. So that's one of the reasons we went off outsource and overseas. And obviously there's a rate benefit of that
And
and everything.
the moonlighting piece, that is unique too. Like you've had a number of engineers who I think you've had some people who are retired from their primary job and then they're doing some fractional work. And then you have people in other parts of the US or locally too, who have a full-time job elsewhere, but they'd like to get an extra 10 or 15 hours of work in a week. And you found a way to pull them into your system as well. That's what
Right.
you mean when you say moonlighting, right?
Yeah, moonlight. Yeah, because the local guy here, Scott, he was that first test case that I was discussing, and he does these site visit jobs where if somebody needs a wall taken out in their kitchen, he'll go do the site visit. But he just does it 2 nights a week. He's got a full-time job. He likes his job. He'll probably never come work for me full-time because he's got a great job and he works for the government. So why would he? Right.
Hmm.
But he likes working for me because he commutes here to our town and he's here 2 days a week. And so while he's here, he's away from his family. He's like, well, I might as well work if I'm away from my family.
Sure.
So that's why everybody has a different story that works for us in these moonlight situations. Another one lives in Augusta and he works for the government as well. And he likes his job as well, but he just doesn't do any design work. And so he wants more design experience. We find that a lot, like people that just want more design experience and otherwise would not have been able to be hired as like an engineer full time because you're not going to have the pay that you would as a 20-year veteran in the industry. Maybe you're working for the government, but you never really got into design. How would you do that? Well, you could try moonlighting for somebody and get like a novice rate, an introductory rate, but it's supplementary to your regular income. So that's one reason. Or the engineer in Utah who had a tutoring business and she was good with what she was doing, but she wanted to use her engineering degree. So she worked part-time and she moved up to full-time recently. So that's an example of you could be on the way into full-time and kind of a
Sure.
trial basis. So that's an advantage of that. Not to mention now we have a Utah engineer and we're looking to get work in Utah. And so we have an engineer in Columbia, South Carolina, and we're looking to grow our business that place. And then also Columbia, South America.
Right. Right.
So we were kind
Right.
of in
Which is
both
quite
Columbias.
unique. So, and one of the things I hope listeners, some of them may be completely familiar with this business model of structural engineering and design. And I mean, I guess it makes sense. And I'm an engineer, of course, by training. So I've been around and studied some of the same things you have. But for those who don't know, you and your work and the people on your team are the ones who make sure that bridges and buildings like stay up and don't fall down and also aren't vibrating or shaking in such a way that is disturbing to people while they're in it or makes them feel fearful. So you take architect's vision and the owner's use that they desire of the building and you make sure that it's serviceable and stays up and all those things and it's the right size of steel or wood or concrete, so on and so forth. Your job and the work that you do is very important, but it's not always kind of the glamorous visible part of it, but it's a great service to society if somebody's doing this. So I'm just curious, what are some of your favorite structures, maybe buildings, bridges, whatever that you in 2096 have designed? What are some of the best ones?
That's a good question. Let's see. It was the one that was done really prior to the actual founding of 2096, but it was done as sole practitioner. This beach house in Hilton Head always stands out. And it was one I touched personally, meaning I did most of the calcs or a lot of the calcs. And I did have some help on that one. And that was a taste of outsourcing, even though it was a US based company that supported me. But that was a really cool project because it was modern design. It had a lot of steel and concrete and a product called CLT, which is like mass timber. It's these thick pieces of wood. Some people, the guy that was the architect for it called it plywood on steroids, because it's
Mm,
like 3 inch thick plywood that can span,
mhm.
5 or 8 feet. So that was a cool project. Over the past couple of years, we have this one. We're going to be down in Savannah next week, of course, and you'll be able to see one of the jobs that we're working on in Ellis Square. It's a 6-story micro hotel or boutique hotel right there in Savannah, Georgia. So that's a cool building. It's steel, mostly steel, and it's got some really interesting nuances to it in terms of there's an existing building that's 0 feet away, literally, from this building. So we have like an expansion
Mhm.
joint between the two buildings. So there's a couple interesting things about that. And we were discussing that one a little bit earlier too about some of the challenges I've been dealing with on the project. But with good projects usually come good challenges. And then that was interesting because it's probably one of the tallest buildings we've done. And then Another interesting one was in right here in our backyard, Beaufort. There's a church school or like a private school called Holy Trinity, and we did some really long trusses for that. I think something like 100 feet long. So it was kind of neat because this building had these really wide spans, and then the Digby in Ellis Square had some really tall heights. So one, and we did all those in the same year. So it was neat to see, okay, a really wide building and a really tall building all in the same year. So that was kind of fun.
So we're just going back. So you have these remote people. You've built this company that is local people who are part-time, local people that are full-time, plus other areas of the country and even other areas of the world. You're bringing them together to create structures such as you just described. And 2096. So there's two things I want to explore before we wrap up today. One is 2096. Yeah, modulus of elasticity, right? And it's steel and how it behaves when you put load on it and pull on it, basically. But you've also taken that 2096, and some people in the business books talk about having values, core values that's spoken of a lot. And sometimes companies go through a values determination exercise, or sometimes they just go copy ones that look good on the internet and maybe they post something on the wall that they think their clients would want to see, but they don't really take the time to like work them and get curious about how to work them and try to see how to get better and how to talk about it again and how to exemplify when you do it. And that's something that's unique about your company. It's certainly foundational to being able to have remote employees, is to have core values that you actually really believe in, that you actually really work with everybody, because that's a journey for them. They're coming to you. It's the values of the company that you're working to live into every day, but people are coming from outside. And of course, you're looking for people that fit, but you're going to have to almost help train them, to use your word, train or coach. You're a pretty good coach too. You're a trainer, coach. So could you share with people how is that you establish the values and then how you're making sure you get better and better at living them and working them as a company?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of the business books, and I mentioned a couple as well. And one of the first things that you'll read in any business book is you got to have a set of, it's called different things, right? Maybe mission values or a mission statement. And actually, it's confusing because you try to put these things together with different business books, and it doesn't really make sense. So I kind of just created my own thing. Really, what I think the real thing is you have to make it your own. And I call it the 6 E's. So 29E6 and the 6 E's of 2096, which it's sort of like vision, mission, values all in one, but
Mm-hmm.
it's broken down by 6 things. And not necessarily in any particular order, but I'll try to hit all six. Hopefully I can do that. But so one of them is enhance the world around us. And it sounds a little bit like a Miss America pageant, is what I say sometimes, like meaning it lofty idea, but it's what gets you up in the morning. It's sort of our why we do what we do. And we're designing buildings, and some are wide and some are tall and some are porches and not quite as, but that's porch was somebody's dream, right? Like they wanted to expand their porch. We had this Gold Star, this guy who wanted to have Gold Star families in his house. That's a really cool, like that's enhancing the world around you and just our interaction with people. And so that gets me excited. Like, how can we enhance the world around us? And I
Mm-hmm.
want our team to get excited about that. And it may be just the way that we work, right? So that's one thing. And then we as engineers, our number one thing is ensure safety. That's why that's what we do. That's what we do, right? And we're making sure that when you walk around in the building, you shouldn't have to think about, did the engineer do the right job here? So that's what we do. And we also want to do everything we do with excellence. So that was really important to me to make sure that's somehow documented or somehow a part of our culture is I don't ever want to just say, yeah, I think that's okay, or that's probably going to do it, or that's probably going to cut it. I don't ever want that to be a type of how we work. And that's not just the calcs, or that's not just the drawings. That's again how we interact with people, et cetera. So that's three of them. But as a business, we know we have to have E for earn because that's the lifeblood of a business is the money. And without profit, you can't run a business.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely one of our E's. And we talk about that and we want to make a profit. And I want my employees to enjoy some of that profit. I want to enjoy that profit. And also I want the work that we do to lend itself to profit for the people we work for. So again, that Gold Star guy or the guy who's building a hotel, they're doing it most likely to either earn a profit, or maybe in the case of a porch, they can use some of that money. They don't have to spend all their money on this porch, right? So we want to do efficiently, which is one of our other E's, right? We want to be efficient. And that's more going to the how we do things. In other words, you could call it our USP, our unique selling proposition. So we do it efficiently, and that does have multiple angles. So the end result, like the design we do, we don't want to design a building. While we do want to be safe and ensure safety, we don't want to have so much steel it costs too much money, or it doesn't make sense how it's built, right? It takes too much time, which would be inefficient. And then thirdly, inefficient in the sense of the design that we do, like the time it takes us to do the calcs and put the drawings together. Because each one of these E's, by the way, it has a number of umbrellas that come under, or trees that come under it, you know. So how does E work out? Well, that's a whole ball of wax in terms of our process. And we have what we call I&I team, the innovations and impediments team, that works on how to become more efficient. And that's a big part of our company, is be more efficient so that we can in turn earn. But it all lays out with these 6 E's. And the last one, I think this is 6, but the last one is enjoy. So, you know, enjoy is another one that's very important. And how do we interact with each other? I've talked about that, a couple of them, because some of these overlap, of course. How do we interact with our clients, and also how we do our work? Like, we want to have jobs that are, you know, enjoyable. And the people that work here, we want them to work in the area of expertise, because usually when you're working in an area that you enjoy, you're very good at it, right? Or vice versa. So we work with, obviously, on making sure that people's personality profile, for example, is in their area of strength. Like, we don't want somebody who loves to be in the office doing calculations out making cold calls or something like that. So being in, you know, working in area of joy is important. And so what I do is I really use those 6 E's to make our decisions for the company. And I really encourage our team to use those to make decisions as well, whether it's a job-based decision or whether it's like a decision about moving forward. And we also try to go through those E's when we have our company meetings, and we may have an E of the month or E of the week that we go through, and how can we really work on this? Not every meeting, but we'll go through that. It's a way to really encourage everybody to understand what our values are. So that's some of the things that, as you can tell, I get excited about it because it's something that I spend a lot of time on, and when it clicks and it makes sense, it makes it more enjoyable. So
Yeah, it's who you are. It's not just words on a wall. So the other thing I would ask you, and we're going to work to kind of land the plane here a bit in this podcast, is 2096 is the modulus of elasticity, right? And it's about steel. And what I remember in engineering lab or materials lab, wherever we did this, is we had a sample of steel, a rod of steel, and this rod of steel had enlarged ends to it that were threaded, and so people could picture that. And you'd put that rod of steel with the threaded ends would be inside this machine that was able to apply a significant force or stress to that steel rod, and it would pull on it. It would put it in tension, be pulling that steel rod apart. And the way I remember it, which I may not have it exactly right, Andy, but the modulus of elasticity is what governs how much it stretches given the amount of stress I put on it. So the more load I'm putting on it, in simple terms, I'm pulling my arms apart on the YouTube. I'm pulling this thing apart. I put more load on it, and then it like stretches kind of like a rubber band, right? But of course, it doesn't thankfully stretch all the way out like a rubber band. It's just incrementally stretching a little bit. And then as the load goes off, it goes back. And as the load goes on, it stretches and it goes back, right? And
right.
as I remember it, as long as you keep the load within the right range for that sample of steel, it just keeps doing that. You stretch it, it goes back, stretch it, goes back, which is what happens in a building. But if you stretch it too much, then it starts to go into the zone called yield. And as I remember, it stretches out and eventually it would get real thin and it would just break. But it goes to this behavior where it like, and we know this from a paper clip or something, like where we like overflex it and then it like breaks. And that steel is like that. After it reaches that maximum load, it no longer goes back and now it yields and now it's never going to be the same again. And so here's the analogy. A lot of business builders, as they're growing their business from 2017 to 2013, like you, of course, you had a solo practice before then. So you knew your craft, you knew what you were doing, but then you started reading books like E-Myth and you decided you're going to build a real business. And it's great to have a solo practice for anybody who's doing that, right? But you decided you're going to start changing and doing that. My observation of you, Andy, is that you've had a lot of times where there's been stress as things haven't, you've been trying to figure it out and you hire people and then you get back to those values that you have. And those values I know are not only corporate values, you've got a pretty strong value system internally and in your life. So you stretch and then you go back. And for all the business builders out there, it's not, the business build journey is not always, it's not Facebook for everybody, or it's not Tesla or Elon Musk, although he had, his own problems and own challenges sometimes outside of the business. But Andy, you've managed to do it. You've managed to stay into that in your like zone of elasticity and you get recentered and then you get ready and you keep going. And over the years, progressively, boom, 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 you keep moving a bit forward, a bit forward, a bit forward in terms of the work you do, the revenue, the profit. I know sometimes it's been hard to have free time at home and vacations free, but you've done really well. Any tips for other people on that journey for how they can try to stay in that elastic zone so they don't hit the yield point and break and quit? Because we know that happens to a lot of businesses, right? There's that well-published stat about businesses failing, but a lot of times because the entrepreneur just says this isn't worth it and they yield. And that's okay too. Like sometimes there can be a lot that people shouldn't stick with a business because they're afraid of going back to a job. It's fine to go get a job for some people. There's no shame in that either. But any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah,
That
I
we
mean,
just talked about?
you hit the nail on the head with the personal life side, because that's the real reason we're supposed to be building a business. I mean, obviously everybody to his own, but ultimately it's to have more flexibility. I mean, if we wanted to be working for a job, we would have a job, right? But the idea behind, I mean, obviously more money, maybe, but for me, I want more flexibility. And I think the biggest thing is, what can you do to simplify your life a little bit more? And maybe it's not 100%, maybe it's 1% or 10%. So, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. Like, it's definitely something I continue to work on. And we were going over some of those goals earlier about taking off a hat or two that I'm wearing, too many hats. And so what can I do that I can either delegate or cut out, maybe a work type, or simplify something, or train somebody to do something, or whatever it is, basically looking at that. And because the real fact is, those projects or those jobs or whatever it is that you're doing, there's going to be more jobs next week and next month. Like, I think, oh yeah, I've got to please this client because whatever, and that client, they're gone, they may never come back, right? But my family's still there. I mean, that's the legacy. And what I do for spiritual reasons and for the Lord and for my family, that's what really matters long term. And the business is just a way to get there. So that's hopefully my 2 cents on it. And that's what we talk about here at Business Builder with you and with our Thursday group. And then going to like camp, we try to figure out, mostly it's about how can we make our businesses better, but really the purpose of all that is to make our lives better, not to be zillionaires. I mean, that'd be great, I guess, but
Yeah, we'll take a little bit of that too. And millionaires is good. There's plenty of room between 1 millionaire and 999 millionaire. We don't have to go for the zillionaire. You're right. We'll just keep it to 999 millionaire, right?
yeah,
Andy, if anybody would like to get in touch with you, how could they reach you and connect?
they can just email me, Andy at 296.co.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Well, Andy, thanks so
Oh,
much for showing up and sharing your story.
yeah, no, but thank you, Wayne. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, Andy at 29e6.co, no M on the end, .co. Okay, got it. Thanks, Andy. And as always, to you and everybody else, go get them.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning into the Business Builder Way podcast. If this episode spoke to you, click that subscribe button and share it with a friend. That's how this message gets out into the world. If it is helpful for us to have a short conversation, I'd love to do that. Send me an email at wayne@businessbuildercamp.com.